Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Transform Stress into Strength with Dynamic Embodiment Practices. Connect your mind and body with somatic movement to move with joy and freedom. My name is Stephen Dyna. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm really delighted to be with you here, getting to learn from one of the preeminent pioneers in the whole somatic movement field. Her name is Dr. Martha Eddy. She's a registered somatic movement therapist. She's a founding director of Dynamic Embodiment, somatic movement therapy training, and she's taught for Shift before and is really at the forefront not only of the personal transformation, but also some of the wider implications for this work in the world. So we're really blessed to have her. So Dr. Eddy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I always enjoy being with the Shift Network, but especially this time with you.
Great. And I'll call you Martha from here on out, but honoring your doctorate as well. But I want to let everyone know up front that we're going to have this time and we're going to dive into some practices that can really benefit your life. And you're going to have a chance to go much deeper in a brand new program with Martha called Dynamic Embodiment Movement. So we'll share a little bit about that towards the end of the hour. So Martha, I'd love for you to share a little bit of your backstory of what led you into somatic movement therapies and this sort of the larger somatic potential that we have to really liberate.
Well, thank you for that question. I feel serendipity guides my life, and I believe it was some of the early introductions to the real pioneers of at least what some people refer to as Western consciousness practices. So building on many Eastern and Global South influences, people at the turn of the century like F.M. Alexander, the Alexander Technique, Moshe Feldenkrais of Awareness Through Movement, and my teacher, Irmgard Bartenieff, came into my life through serendipity. And I also met, from the second generation, a student of Irmgard Bartenieff's and many other people, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. So I was just sort of gifted with the presence of two major leaders, brilliant women that had developed not only an integration of what they learned from their teachers, but a curriculum of their own based, in both cases, on consciousness through movement.
Well, it is very fortuitous that you had both of those influences. We're going to talk a little bit about transforming stress. So maybe set a context for understanding stress from a somatic experiencing perspective, and then we can build from there.
So I actually was one of those people that loved getting the kinesthetic nature of my being validated. So I loved somatic movement, and I wasn't a dance major in college, but I always danced and performed. So I'm a kinesthetic learner. I need to kind of move to think, to quote Sir Ken Robinson, who was the head of the school system in England and the UK for a while. So with that moving to think, there's just a need also to make life kind of decisions sometimes. And this work ended up becoming very important, not just for dancing or for moving more efficiently, but also in helping to make decisions in stressful times. And that could be as simple as, what's my gut feeling right now? Why am I queasy? Let's look into that. Or my shoulders are starting to tense up. Where am I under-resourced that I can't breathe in a way that my shoulders can just relax? What's going on with my heart in this moment? Within that good knowledge, I also wanted some scientific validation from a Western standpoint. And so I ended up studying movement sciences. Now I'm an honorary professor at Teachers College, Columbia University in the Biobehavioral Studies Department, which is my alma mater. And with that, I started to study the work of Hans Selye. I don't know if you remember him, but he was groundbreaking in the 60s by defining stress. What is stress? And it was news to me. I thought of stress as a completely bad thing, but I was an exercise physiology student, and I was learning, well, you can only strengthen your muscles if you tear them a little bit, if you put them under stress. So I learned that stress is change, and it's also often, in the case of attempting to strengthen, overload. but not so much overload that there's injury. Just enough overload that good sleeping and good eating and good self-care transforms the healing into new muscle tissue, for instance, with that metaphor. Or if you take it on other levels, new thought patterns. If movement is helping us become more adjustable, more flexible, more able to see different points of view, then you might try something that's difficult and try to see it differently. Maybe it's a relationship, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, I'm stronger for this. I have more choices. So those are a few examples that are important to me.
So it sounds like there's a first pivot to seeing not stress is a bad thing, but a stress is sort of, we want to optimize how much stress, and so that we're not reacting to a stressful circumstance or pushing it away, but rather sort of trying to find what's the zone of how do we relate to that in a way that's more optimal.
That's exactly it. And the same thing goes for conflict. We can't get rid of conflict. It's part of human nature. It's part of dealing with nature. We are nature. And when the winds are too strong or overwhelming, that's conflictual, that's stressful. So in all cases, having some resiliency skills in our back pockets for when the times get tough, because sometimes times are just going to get tough, whether it's on an intrapsychic level or an interpersonal level, or as you mentioned before, a global level.
Now, when you were talking before about some of the symptoms of stress in the body, like I was also hearing a little bit like there's a body intelligence that's trying to express through some of those symptoms. So you can build a little bit on what you were sharing there.
Fantastic. You may remember with my work with the Shift Network, resetting the nervous system. So basically learning to calm. I was one of the first people to write a curriculum, write lectures for conferences on calming the nervous system, and always from an embodied perspective. It's basic physiology. We know, and now we know lots more about fight and flight, and then fight and flight and freeze, or appeasement, or fawning, all the different ways that we come into a sympathetic, and I think it's interesting that it's a sympathetic. The word sympathetic in English means that there's some kind of caring or at least attunement with someone. So the sympathetic nervous system, the thoracolumbar region, has these nerves that are telling the heart to either pump up or calm down. And it's the more parasympathetic that really calms it down. And so we've got increased heart rate, increased breathing, more rapid breathing. And then we also have changes in blood flow. Very important. The blood leaves the digestive system, the healing center, the center that says we're going to rebuild, like those muscles that I was just describing, if they got a little torn, and grow back stronger. So basically, we're dealing with blood flow out to the legs and hands and arms in order to fight or flee. If we freeze, we're holding all of that. Or if we only run some, or if we fight, we might even hyperadrenalize even more. So this is pretty basic. Almost everybody knows this anatomy, physiology now, that the adrenal glands kick in with different kinds of cortisol and adrenaline, and there are all sorts of biochemical changes at the neuroendocrine level, and that movement and mindfulness and mindful movement are great ways to just say, now we can go back to the parasympathetic state. Now we can choose to lower our breath rate, take a deeper, slower exhale, and allow for a deeper, slower inhale. We can choose to even talk to our hearts and go, okay, you're palpating. What do you want to do with that energy? It doesn't have to be in this sympathetic state, which unfortunately, I don't quite understand it. Maybe it's for the tribe, taking care of the tribe. We sympathetically are going to defend ourselves, but we're going to calm it down by doing something with that energy, because it's in our bloodstream. We've got to do something with it. I'll stop there and see what you're thinking about all that.
How does this fit with what you're saying before, that there's sort of an optimal stressor of the system? So it's like, so some of the symptoms are actually our body gearing up, and that we're wanting a little bit of that stress to sort of build strength. And so then you're now sort of like talking more about going more into parasympathetic. Do we want to kind of strike a balance between the two?
Again, my model in dynamic embodiment is the dynamism. So we want to embody as many different states of being, so that in a given moment we can both know it because it's become familiar. Oh yeah, I recognize this place. Oh yes, I recognize this place. Or, you know, something in between. So those were the three I showed. If we have those three in our kind of in the right place, in the right pocket where you know how to find it in a moment of stress, or which could be, by the way, a kind of depressive stress, there's a sense of collapse, and some of us will call that beyond freeze, just into almost the kind of plain dead possum depression. With any of these extremes of either total fight or complete collapse or depression or catatonia, even if you get serious about it, we need to know how to get back into the sympathetic state, which is actually changing our posture. That thoracolumbar region is what holds the head up. It's what connects the heart to the pelvis, the center of the body, the central creative center. And so with that, if we have a access route, that's the word I was looking for, to the sympathetic nervous system, great. If we're already there, do we have a familiarity with being calm? Can we find the roadway, the pathway to getting from here to there? And practice helps. And that's what movement is. It's actually a shift. And that's why I love the Shift Network. It's a shift of states. It's a change of consciousness. Sometimes I need to rev up. Sometimes I need to calm down. Sometimes I want to play with that in and out, being receptive, but then also giving.
I'd love to understand a little more about why shifting the posture can then affect this sort of the mental state as well.
Well, thank you for that, because it's true. I kind of skipped a beat. The brain is in the head. We know that. The spinal cord is in the torso, and the nerves are coming off of the brain, well, off of the eyes and ears and mouth and nose. So in the head, they're coming off of the spinal cord through the neck and out the arms. So what we're perceiving, what we're sensing, what is stimulating us, whether it's a calming force or an excitatory force, is coming through the spine. And it's actually this elevator that says either have an instant reaction, like you can just stay on the same floor and withdraw, and that's a good thing. If something's hot, you don't have to go all the way up to the brain to just reflexively move your hand away to prevent burning. But if you're in a pattern of behavior that's just constantly happening, that's not really this kind of one-time traumatic or just overly intensive, as we were talking about before, stimulus. It's a pattern. And so that's a place to practice. Oh, what can I change through my frontal lobe, through my imagination, and tell my limbic system, the emotional center, and tell the cerebellum, my place of balance, and tell my spine, and speak to is what I'm saying when I say and tell my spinal cord to talk to the nerves to make a shift. So again, the nerves coming out of the rib cage region and the lower back region are going to be the ones that are heightening our tensility, if you will. And the nerves coming off of the parasympathetic are cranial sacral. So they're coming out of the area of the cranium, the head, and the area of the pelvis, the sacrum. And that's why cranial sacral therapy, or the rhythm of the cerebrospinal fluid, is so helpful. Moving with that rhythm, moving those body areas, help to calm, and activating the chest, coming out of depression and forward into motor expression through that area, are helpful for kind of ramping up, as you mentioned.
Is that the same as working with the gut heart brain axis that you sometimes describe?
Absolutely, but it's slightly different, because what I was just describing was pretty what we would call neuroskeletal, right? How my nerves are going to my muscles, which are influencing my posture, my skeleton. But when we get into the gut, heart, and brain, we can think of our brain also as an organ. And the organs are part of the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is a find in Chinese medicine and in Western somatic practices with the emotional world. So it shows up in our language, that person's got a lot of bile. So there's a kind of, or anger from the liver, and the heartfulness, or grief and the lungs. So these kind of associations with emotions are what come up when we go to gut, brain, heart. That axis is talking more about, how am I feeling about what I'm taking in of the world in terms of what I eat and what I absorb into my being and what I let go of. So that would be the digestive tract. The heart, what am I drawn to? Where's my passion? What do I need to defend against? And then the brain really kind of saying, oh, but there are many possibilities. Here's where I can have creative choices with different neural pathways. So each of these centers is a little bit more organy, more feeling based. And obviously we want to kind of balance, and we do a lot of this in my systems of body mind centering knowledge that is brought into dynamic embodiment, with really playing with even the embryological idea that the gut brain is the endoderm. It's an early stage of being, and the ectoderm is the skin. It's the nervous system, and the spinal cord and nerves. So balancing those two is important too. We don't always want to just be about thought and action. We also want to have emotional life to be the heartful people that we are.
I hear a lot of really honoring the full range of intelligences in the body too, that they each have their own kind of complementary wisdom.
That is really why I just smile, because I'm happy. When I first named my training program, this blend of the Laban Bartenieff with the body mind centering work, I just called it the somatic movement therapy training, because no one was using that term at the time. I mean, Thomas Hanna was using the term somatics, and he created the magazine, the Somatics Journal, and it was influential, but no one else was saying that their program was the somatic movement therapy training. So I just had that name. And then about 8 years later, with the renaming, I had to rename my training because people were starting to use it. And first I got a little I had a little sympathetic reaction, like, oh, meaning my heart was touched and I was a little defensive. And I was like, wait a minute, but that's what you wanted. You wanted people to know this word somatic. You wanted people to get into somatic movement. So now I just have to say what kind of somatic movement I do. And so I picked the embodiment was critical, right? That's what this whole mind-body idea is. But the dynamism, which the Laban work also has so much of, and that's a little bit of what I want to show later and get us moving with if people are up for, is all about polarities and continuum, the continuum between polarities, whether it's in space, whether it's in behavior, and knowing how to modulate, which again is part of how we handle stress. It's not necessarily swing over to the other place. We say, work all day and go to sleep. We know that we have fitful sleep if we just do that. We actually have to work all day, ideally with some sense of pleasure if we're lucky enough to really love our work. But if it's stressful, find a way out and maybe calm the brain even more so that we have deep sleep. So that's moving along a continuum. And so dynamism is the word that I love because it implies choice, but in this case also implies what you said, a range of knowledge and a range of being able to modulate along these different points.
Yeah, and we're not just fixated on one part of a polarity. We're really embracing that full spectrum. That's great. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about this sort of awareness of like being able to sense into different areas of the body and build your kind of capacity to really understand each domain of our movement and our organs from the inside out.
Well, my hats are off to Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen for really opening that door. And she helped share with us that she learned a lot from one of the yogis that she studied with, Yogi I'm sorry, I'm losing it right now. I was going to say Ramana, but that might be wrong. But in the 1970s in New York City, he had come to New York, and she had private sessions as well as small group sessions with him. And he was teaching about activating the organs. And then when she lived in Japan, she studied Katsen Ganundo, which relates to some of the other, what we would now call somatic systems coming out of Japan, which were about moving from the autonomic nervous system, just allowing the organs to move. So that's the autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that connects us to the heart and the gut. So that's a bridge between the ectoderm and the endoderm. And so being able to find that connection is very important. So she started investigating, well, what is the mind of every system of the body? So just today, I was teaching Laban movement analysis, and one of the students said, well, I was really fascinated with the fluid system. And I said, well, actually, that's body-mind centering. But I think you're talking about Laban's concept of flow, that we can be tense, and that would be more bound flow. And we can be free, and that's free flow. And we can modulate by having, grasping a glass, just enough flow so that we're not tense, but we're not going to drop this glass, because if I'm too free flow, it's going to fall on the floor. So she was talking about the fluids of the body. And this has been my life work, is bringing together, what is it in our bodies? What can we resource? Which tissues are we resourcing when we want to be more bound? Well, muscles are really helpful for that. And also our ligaments help determine our range of motion. They give us limits. And that I knew from the body-mind centering work. I felt it. We experienced it, both doing hands-on work as well as doing movement. So between movement, sounding, and touch, we learn, oh, this is a more ligamentous expression. Even something like that would be defining the limit of a joint and only going to the limit. If you just do this, you're more in the joint itself or the joint fluid, which is inside there. So I'm getting at what I call the physiological underpinnings of our dynamics. So our movement is dynamic. It has different tones, different feelings, and it's coming from different tissues in the body. And it's a fairly long study because you're learning all of anatomy and all of physiology, and then what movements are evoked from them.
Really fascinating. I'd love to ask you a little bit about a practical application in terms of anger management. Sometimes people, when they get stressed, they get agitated and often will act out with anger. And so I'd love for you to sort of talk about how this work with dynamic embodiment really specifically applies to managing anger.
So I'd love to give kind of the classic answer, because I am trained in conflict resolution and was for at least 10, 15 years an educator for social responsibility, teaching in New York City public schools, training teachers to help themselves and students that became mediators to help other students to mediate or resolve a conflict peacefully. And it was called Resolving Conflict Creatively program. So with that, what we mostly teach is, one, to cool down. So that's that parasympathetic mode. So if you can just get into this parasympathetic state for a little bit, that's ever so helpful. So for instance, as was done in Resetting the Nervous System course at here with the Shift Network, a lot of work with the cranial sacral rhythm would be an example of calming. But if you're in the moment of anger, you're not going to do that. So a little more typical is just to step away and count down to 10, or to slow down your exhalations, or to do some alternate nostril breathing. Just focus on breath. Change the breath rhythm, as I said before, from this increased heart rate, increased breath rhythm, to a calm down heart rate and breath rhythm. Then in dynamic embodiment, I took it to a slightly different place from a question a student of mine asked. Excuse me for a second. Not sure what that is. Yeah, I need a breath. She said, I teach a lot of fathers and sons dance. And they want more activity. They want to kind of play fight. They want also to resolve conflicts in their family. What do I do to work with that kind of already fighting energy? And I said, sometimes in our work, and this is part of my model, which is to observe what's happening and actually support it, allow it to have its expression. So then the natural recuperation can come. Now, I don't mean if someone's beating someone, just take it to the end. No, but we all know from the early, again, 60s to 70s Reichian work, that energy's in you. So you might need to direct it elsewhere that's not going to hurt somebody and use it. So in this case, I mentioned this thoracolumbar region, and I said, let's work first individually, lying on the floor or a table or a sofa or wherever you are, or bed, and prone, face down. Press into your arms such that you're stimulating the nerves into the neck, but also making a kind of curve in your back. So there's some pressure and reshaping of the lumbar and thoracospine. So everybody might want to really just try this for a second. So rather than sinking and just kind of being free flow and passive weight would be the Laban way to describe it, we're going to be a little more bound flow. So you're expressing some of that tension, but you're taking it out of your shoulders and out of projecting to others and into your own body and using it as a kind of stretch between your shoulder blades. Press the rib cage into the shoulder blades. Let the heart recede a little bit into back space. And breathe there and hold it. And then use that energy to come back to a different posture. So again, what we like to do is with a partner then be hand to hand. And it might be someone that you wanted to fight, and you might actually push against them equally. So push hands uses this in Tai Chi, really pushing against each other, but then eventually let it become a softer movement, but staying in contact. So that's the modulation from very bound to still connected with some boundness, to then sometimes we put on music and it becomes our own version of ballroom dancing without even knowing how to do ballroom dancing. What I'm describing here is that the stress is usually in this area, in the sympathetic region. So in order to meet it, one way to calm down, and we could do it for ourselves. I'm going to push back just a little bit so I think you can see. You can just put your hands on your lap and do the same thing. Just kind of push into that area and then let it go. It's like, let there be some tension. Allow it to be there through these organs, through these nerves, and then just see what the response wants to be and just loosen up a little bit. So those are little personal practices that you can do for yourself. Like, go ahead and express the anger a little bit, the frustration. People do it in their jaw. They just grit their teeth, but better to do it in the area that then will physiologically shift to the parasympathetic, to more ease.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm appreciating how you're starting to guide us into some embodied practices. And do you want to take some time to do a more extended set of practices with us now?
Absolutely. It'd be really fun. I'd love to say a little bit about it first, just so people have a context. This is going to be Laban's dimensional scale. But since we're also talking about stress and conflict, and I have done work both in schools, as I mentioned before, but also working with organizations that are under conflict, and also working together with other friends doing, border conflict and different cultural conflicts. The scale was viewed and derived by Laban's observation of people doing fencing practice. His father was a high up commander in the Prussian army. So we're talking now the 1870s, 90s, into the turn of the century, into the turn of the 20th century. And so he got this idea of modulating our understanding of use of space. So doing a scale, like a musical scale, with our bodies to be prepared to go in any direction from watching fencers, people working with their swords. And he said, we go up in order to defend the jugular. I'm going to push back a little bit again. So we go up to defend the jugular. We come down to defend the abdomen region. So we have up and down, jugular, abdominal region. Then we have across the body, which could be defending, or it could be defending my own body. It could be also using the sword. And then we have a slice that's opening the body. Feels very exposed, but you're busy with this defensive instrument. Then we pull back in order to go forward. And in our work, we tend to do everything on both sides in order to even out the body. So if you're not already trying this with me, feel free to. So there's this up and down and across and open and back and forward. I'm going to do it on the other side. Up can be faster, it can be slower. You can notice how your shoulders feel, whether your waist is, restricted at all. If you're needing to wiggle and adjust, please do it. Now that's just with the arm. You can do this even with your eyes. In my eye relaxation classes, we look up, we look down, we look side and side, we feel the eyes come back, we go forward. So it's just using space in a harmonious way, even around the image of self-defense. Then I'm going to show this seated and standing. So I'm going to step back a little bit further because anything can be explored in a wheelchair or just because you'd like to be seated. You can do it lying down and transpose it to a different orientation so that the front is the ceiling, but it's still your body that is defining up and down and side to side, which is the horizontal, and forward and back, which is the sagittal plane, the plane of the Sagittarian. So I'm going to go back. And now we're not going to use the defense scale images, and we can use both arms if you like. You could even just do your shoulders if you want, but we're just going up and down. And just notice your breath as you do that. Maybe breathe in. And a slow breath out. Now go ahead and move the shoulder across to one side and then open, and across to the other side and then open, and then back and then forward. So just systematically moving through the body in space. Then we layer on meaning, but also bigger movements if we want. So again, now I'm going to use both arms, stretching up and coming down, going across and opening. We'll go to the other side, going across. Notice how it narrows your vision, and then open to the world. Do you feel ready for that? Let's do that part again. So we go up, finding lightness, aeration, and then come down and begin to find your strength. Now go across and channel your vision, really focus. And then as you open, see if you can feel your peripheral vision coming into play, even if you do or don't turn your head. And we're going to go to the other side. Up and down. Add some pressure like we did before. Now across and open with the vision. Now the last dimension, so that was the vertical and the horizontal, is this sagittal. We're going to come back, and you can even weave your hand back, and that kind of feels interesting on the wrists, back and forward. Back and forward. And you might even notice how your heart feels. Can you feel your lungs? How are they connected? So each of these directions, Laban also related to different qualities or dynamics of expression. So sometimes you heard me already say light and increased pressure. So decreased pressure, anti-gravity, which is a whole metaphor for taking in life energy, universal energy, and not having to struggle up, but just allow. And then coming down and feeling rooted and strong. and then crossing your body. We talked about focusing, channeling. So when does it help to point at something and say, this is my decision, I want this? And when does it say, I need to think about all the possibilities? So just play with that for a second. When do I want to be really focused? And does it help to just cross my body to do it? And when does it help to really open, open, open? And then reaching into the back, we can think of it as a timeline into the past and bringing something into the future. I love that. What do my ancestors want to bring to this decision? And who do I want to give this to? And maybe it's like, I want to tell you no, or maybe it's like, oh, I have something I'm really excited about. So noticing the quality. So now I'll just say that we've done two things. We've gone up and down, side to side, back and front, the three cardinal directions of life on this earth: the sense of verticality, the horizon line, and action in the sagittal plane. Some of his proteges went on to say in decision making, we might be literally exploring the world, then kind of in this up and down range, deciding what is good for us, but then finally doing it. So there's a lot of information in how our friends move, how our clients move. Are they more exploring? Are they deciding? Or are they evaluating? So it's pretty amazing. Just practicing the movement might just help you find, like, oh, I need to think about both sides of the problem. And now I need to make a decision, come to my center, my midline, and do it. I'm going to stand up now, but you can continue seated if you like. So it's the same thing again, but this is just a chance to say it in a slightly different way and have you explore that meaning of my verticality is my sense of self, that kind of postural component of finding my own dignity, my sense of self-worth. So can I just breathe in, and maybe I want to look up and relate to the heavens to really feel my magic, the mystery of being on this planet. And then can I allow it to settle and really recognize that I am on this planet, have my feet receive my weight, and then let it come down and actually find my strength, because sometimes we need to be strong and determined. So just find that pressure. So again, going up and feeling rarefied, open, light, and then finding strength. And then crossing the body and focusing. But you can do it with all of your body too. You can cross your legs. You can say, oh, I just need to think. I'm thinking of the thinker, actually. So we need to think. We come into our world. We close off a little bit. But then when do I need to open up and hear other people's points of view? And so to the other side, crossing, channeling, having a little bit of blinders on, using central vision. And here I'm using peripheral vision or more scanning. And then this time place is actually learning to be a little quick. And Mr. Rudolf Laban actually, von Laban actually, felt that in the animal kingdom, and we are animals, you would be quick when you were scared of something, reflexively, like I did when I pulled my hand away. So move back with quickness, and then what would it be like for our American or our global culture that's been westernized or industrialized to slow down as we go forward? There's a lot of implications in that. Stepping back more and going forward with a little bit of time, having a sense of ongoingness, that we can actually take time and slow down. So that's what I get from doing the dimensional scale. I'll tell one last story, and you can do this with me if you like, or just listen. But I also am a choreographer sometimes when I'm invited to be. And I work with a project called Global Water Dances, where dancers, and choreographers is a loose term. Anybody that wants to make up a dance or learn it from us online through the videos can become a site leader at a place, usually by a body of water. And our message is clean water for everyone, everywhere. And we often open it with a ritual inviting an indigenous leader to come in and bring their celebratory practices from their culture around water and earth and sky. Sometimes we don't have the access to that person. Something's gone wrong, or they're just not available. And so I come back to this practice, which also has a great tradition in some of the Native American cultures. You may have noticed it, these 4 directions, but also adding the up and down. So I invite you to join me to say, the water coming from the rain and clouds, filling our water bodies and aquifer, becoming a river, and then a bay and an ocean, becoming a river, and then a bay and an ocean. And as I said before, gleaning some wisdom from the past, let's keep our waterways clean or find ways to clean them for our children of the future.
I love that, Martha. I love the way it's like each different dimension and direction has its own wisdom and sort of creating a more integrated decision-making structure, really accessing all these different forms of intelligence. Really very powerful and beautiful.
It served me in my life for many, many years, and in lots of different types of situations, whether it's reading someone's body language and going, okay, they need some time alone right now, just let's go with that. Or they need to be invited to come out of their cave if they're a Cancerian like me. Or, just how do we calm this situation down? Or how do we come into more creative problem solving? If everybody's here, we're not going to really hear each other's ideas. So sometimes we just have to do some vision exercises, some mudras to help wake up this part of the brain that's willing to hear different points of view.
Beautiful. Well, there's one other area that you've touched on, but I think it would be useful to go into a little bit more, and that's the area of grounding. It's something we hear a lot about in terms of really being able to metabolize stress in difficult circumstances. So I'd love for you to share your perspective on grounding from a more dynamic embodiment perspective.
Perfect. So in that picture, I like to say you can ground through any part of the body. So the dynamism is what part of the body is making contact with a place of support. So I don't know if you've ever heard of contact improvisation. So contact improvisation was developed by Steve Paxton from the practice of Aikido, coming more into being a dance. So Aikido, as you probably know, is a martial art that was developed for peace, and it's one that I've practiced. And the whole idea is that when a force is coming at you, you blend with it and you move it. So rather than fight it and come into that more bound flow, sympathetic, heightened place, you just keep the flow going, the fluidity. You let the fluids move. So it's gorgeous. So in contact improvisation, the dancers just make contact and they let the point of contact keep changing. So with that, I learned to get support as a student of contact improvisation from anywhere. Like this is a moment of support. If my hand is on someone else's hand, my hand can rest. And then one of us, without even saying a thing, can shift the leadership. So sometimes you're leading and sometimes you're following, which again is an incredible metaphor for problem solving. When do you step back in leadership and when do you come forward? When do you listen enough to feel there's mutuality? There are a lot of metaphors. So with this kind of coming together, with contact improvisation, with resting, great. If you can lie down on a bed and rest, if you can find whatever perfect firmness of surface that you like, do that. But also know you can rest against the back of your chair in a conscious way, not just schlumping and feeling it kind of dump, I will say, wherever your organs are kind of weak and have lost their volume. One of the images I really like is if you have a carton of milk and you squish it, it's kind of hard. But if it's empty, you can crush it and throw it away. Well, if you don't kind of volumize your body, if you don't breathe into your organs, if you don't let them support your structure, it's really easy to collapse into them.
Hmm.
So resting into different surfaces of your body is actually giving a little bit of breathing space with different shapes, with different contact, with front, back, side, like the dimensional scale we just did, into different organs of your body. And that, of course, when you're working with the autonomic nervous system, is going to calm the nervous system. So we tend to just rest on our back, which is great, but actually it keeps us vigilant and focused outward. This is a big problem with babies. Babies on their back get very stimulated. It's not the best way to sleep. It makes more sense usually to sleep on the stomach, but you can have back problems, especially if you sleep on a soft surface. So we need to modulate. The side lying is such a great place to rest. So just learning to ground through any surface of your body and let go. And in this case, not be strong as you go down into the earth, but what we call yield. Make contact, feel the reciprocity of the support of the earth, of Gaia,
Hmm.
holding us as we move.
Hmm.
And then also feeling your weight as a gift into the earth.
Hmm. Well, it's such a beautiful and much more full-bodied approach to grounding than just like one dimension to really ground through whatever body part that we're working with. So really beautiful offering there, Martha. So let's talk now about your upcoming program, since I really want people to not just be inspired by today, but really make these practices real in their life and really experience the benefit. So Martha's agreed to teach a brand new program for Shift. It's called Dynamic Embodiment Movement, Somatic Techniques for Moving Freely, Regulating Your Emotions, and Savoring Optimal Health. You can find it at the URL dynamicembodimentcourse.com, dynamicembodimentcourse.com. It's a 7-week journey, and each week is going to build on the last. So you're going to get a comprehensive set of movement practices and an expanded map of how to work with your body in a more dynamic, integrative way, so that you can address stress and health and all the good things that come from a really joyfully embodied life. So, Martha, I'd love for you to share in your own words a little bit of the broad overview of where you're going to be taking people and the bigger why of this course. And then I'll read out the module title so you give us a preview of what's coming in each.
Well, first of all, thank you to the Shift. I've been teaching dynamic embodiment for years, and I teach dance classes, body, mind dancing, and moving for life, which was an exercise program that I developed for cancer survivors originally, but has now expanded to being for anybody who just wants to deal with getting moving in a gentle way. Dynamic embodiment movement gives me the freedom, and is something I've been doing with my movement therapy students for years, to really share with all of you the kinds of therapeutic movements, actually, that can bring deeper rest, that can activate a sense of strength and dignity, that can alleviate pain by finding the spaciousness in our joints that might be overly compressed or pinching a nerve. So we're dealing with also the liberatory impact of kind of finding our connection to the earth and to the sky. And in this class, we're going to literally go through each of the body parts. So what do our feet give us? And what is it? Why is it so important to allow our feet to take our body weight and also give us resiliency back? And what is our body center, our creative center, offering to our sense, not just of creativity, but of will and ability to move forward in the world? And then coming up into, the diaphragm and the heart and the lungs, how each of these areas are a gift and part of our resource for managing life. and then coming into the shoulders and the neck, and then into the head. So we're kind of moving our way up through from the earth, from the support of her, into the heavens and into our connectivity and interconnectivity as a species, as a planet, as a universe.
What a beautiful overview. I'll read out the module titles in a little bit more detail in each. So module 1 is Unleash Radiant Wellness and Vibrant Joy with Intentional Movement.
Yeah, so here we're going to just get a chance to start to move and find out a little bit of personal journaling. What is it that keeps you from moving, and what would motivate you to move more often? What kinds of movements are you already familiar with? And me bringing in new possibilities of movement, just like we experienced today, but going into them with more depth, with tips for like safe movement activity and what you can do at home. So we get a taste when people are open to it, to some kind of movement in space, whether it's just walking around the room. Everybody can modify their movement so that it either feels like I'm taking kind of a walk in nature and using my imagination, which is another great way to deal with stress, or full out dancing because that's what you want to do. So we'll have awareness of both pleasure and pain, and learning to listen to body cues in order to find a beautiful balance.
Module 2, Master the Art of Aging Gracefully and Create Your Mind-Body Renaissance with Somatic Movement.
So here we'll get a sense of what somatic movement is all about. I'll probably share a little PowerPoint of my related to my book, Mindful Movement, which is an overview of the whole field of somatic movement, talking about what Alexander Feldenkrais, Traeger, Continuum have all brought to our field. And with that, we'll get into what is the soma. The soma is the living body. It's a Greek word that means the alive body, which implies the body that can heal itself. And that's what we're working with here. How can we use self-awareness and movement as part of our healing ritual? So it'll involve keys to graceful aging. I'll talk more about moving for life, which has kept me in good shape. I started it out of a request from a friend when I was in my, I don't know, maybe 40s. And it's just been the major exercise that I do. And it's so joyous to share movement to music that goes through space in this systematic way with different qualities of movement, some things coming from the breath of yoga and others coming from neurodevelopmental movement and others from working with the lymphatic system. The breast cancer survivors taught me about lymphedema. So I made up exercises based in what I knew from body-mind centering and from Aikido to help get the lymphatic, the immune system going. So those are some examples of what we'll be doing to really understand both the roots of somatic movement in the global South and Asia, as well as where it's gone and how it's still growing throughout the world through different kinds of expressive movement, as well as very informed, prescribed movement flows that I'll take you through.
Module 3, Elevate Your Well-Being and Alleviate Discomfort by Harnessing the Power of Your Feet.
So we were talking about the feet, and we're going to get moving in general in the first 2 modules, but then, and we'll obviously pay attention to our feet. And there's so much more we can do with those 26 bones, how they're designed with arches. Arches are the baseline for support for great buildings, and we have incredible arches, and there are numerous ones in the feet. So we'll play with that body architecture, and we'll maybe even touch our feet if you'll be invited to if you want to, with your socks on or off. And with that, we'll look at walking. What makes for more efficient walking? How can we use the arches not just to stand strong, but to also bounce, to have a sense of vitality and get the fluids moving through our body? And then that's part of overall health. And also ways to calm down any discomfort or tiredness that we have in our feet, even foot baths. I'm also trained in herbal medicine, holistic healing. And so sometimes I like to share some of the things that I do to just love my feet.
Module 4, Enhance your physical coordination and ignite your creativity and healing through moving your pelvis.
So the pelvis is so important. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I think in the United States, it's still true that the primary reason people don't get to work is because of back pain. And back pain is kind of vague, but it's often in the sacroiliac joint, the back of the pelvis, where the sacrum, the spine, is a juncture with the pelvis. That sacrum has to be part of the spine, and it also has to be part of the pelvis, which receives body weight, but also contains body weight of the organs or perhaps a growing child. And so, with that, the ligaments of the pelvis are constantly being kind of taxed a bit. And then, in terms of the chakras and my work with the neuroendocrine system and the idea that where the glands are also relates to our chakras. So, our root chakra and our base chakras are so important to stimulate. And there are various kinds of movements to do that. So we'll find out about the power of the pelvis, the anatomy of the pelvis, how moving from center can help us be stronger in our arms, that kind of connectivity to center, core support, core strength are terms that have evolved with somatic movement becoming, more known. Even before people knew about somatics, they've known about core strength, but that was a fairly new concept in the 60s and 70s. So we'll be exploring what music helps get us moving our pelvis in different ways that feel comfortable and fun.
Great stuff. Module 5, Awaken Inspiration and Embodied Wisdom for Purposeful Living with Heart-Led Movement.
So one of my taglines for dynamic embodiment is know your body, follow your heart. But that actually implies that you are listening to your heart. So we'll spend some time with what are you feeling overall in your body, but then how are you feeling about your body or about those sensations in your body and moving from there. So it's a chance to just let your body do what it needs to do. Sometimes we'll have gentle music on, or maybe I'll play with a gong or some kind of bell so that there's some calming influences, and just have a chance then to also see if your body wants to get playful and your heart wants to beat stronger and get kind of into aerobics. So we'll learn about the anatomy of the heart, the placement, how it's hugged and massaged by the lungs. We'll deepen our breath and learn how to kind of play with controlling the breath and the pulse by understanding the diaphragms of the body and how they interact. And then we'll also see how that impacts our posture, and when is it that we retreat with our heart, and when do we bulge with it, and when do we kind of enclose or spread, as we did with the dimensional scale earlier. And then, as much as we're up for, there'll be some time at the end of these last few classes just for free moving. I can lead some of it, or we can just put on music and just enjoy either visualizing movement, because there's a great neuromotor potential in that. Things can happen in your brain just in that vibe, or moving if you feel like it.
Module 6, Harmonize Your Brain, Body, and Heart for Compassionate Wholeness.
So it's great to get the heart going, but ultimately we do make a lot of decisions from our head, and our brain is a beautiful thing. And as I indicated earlier, there are many parts to the brain. So there's the emotional center, there's the creative center that's processing information from and developing language and singing. And then there's the ability to balance and tilt and fall. So we're going to get to know our brains a little bit, the low and the high brain, and then also discover how gentle touch of the chest, the neck, the head can be great to just reconnect. And especially as we come down through the throat into the heart, literally see if you can move your heart to move your head and maybe change your perspective, or move your head and connect with your heart, include your wholeness, which is very different than I'm just turning my head, but I'm turning my head from my heart. You're going to convey a different message, and it's going to feel different. So learn how these perceptions from the eyes and the ears influence posture, spinal energy, and just a sense of overall well-being.
And finally, module 7, craft a future of visionary living with integrated movement.
Yeah, so I always like to have a last class where we review things, we take your questions that you've left, maybe in the Facebook page or through different chat functions. And then I get to take that information and design a class that reviews what people are most interested in reviewing, but also gives you time again to journal, write, to reflect, to make a little program for yourself, set some goals. And we can do a little of that earlier on, but you're going to want one now that you're going to do on your own, so that as you go out into the world, of course, you can always go back to the videos and watch them again, or some of the reading materials. However, it's nice to really do your own program if you like, and that can mean coming to classes that have more movement in them. In particular, we'll review the sun salutation, which we will have begun probably in module 3, but maybe even earlier in module 2. And I have an adapted sun salutation, one that can be done seated or using a chair as support with different body parts. So we'll prioritize goals and create a personal movement program. And again, celebrate together in movement.
Love it. Well, what a beautiful program and offering for everyone who chooses to join you. So again, all the details are at dynamicembodimentcourse.com. And I'll share a little bit more. So not only do you get the 7 90-minute live sessions with Martha, which is going to include recordings, both video and audio of every session. You'll have time to ask your questions live. You also get word-for-word transcripts to go back and study and highlight, as well as weekly exercises for practices for at home, a Facebook community to support your journey, and small group time to connect with other participants. And on the page, you'll also see a number of extra bonuses to enhance your journey as well. There's a PDF excerpt from Martha's book, Mindful Movement, called Somatic Dance and Environmental Activism. Is This Spirituality? I think that's a cool element to bring in too, about the wider implications of this work for the world.
I loved writing that chapter. It was so special to just sort of write from my own experience of having somatic movement reconnect me to my spirituality. I am the daughter of 2 ministers. They are very open-minded, spiritual people. I say as if they're here in the present, because I do feel that they live with me. And yet they definitely had their, religious beliefs. But when I got to college and I was doing somatic movement and I was getting outside, because we grew up in New York City, and just being in nature, I came back and I said, I'm willing to say grace, but it's going to be to Mother Nature. And we're like, cool, let's do it. So that is sort of the essence of this chapter. It's writing about how when we attune with our bodies, we actually start to attune with the nature of us. And then if we step outside, then we're in our natural form. We're in our natural selves. And with that, we often, I find, open to the universal mystery. How did we get here? Who are we? Why is the tree so beautiful? Why does the ocean sound like that? And with that, we can move from there, we can rest from there. But this book kind of talks about what a lot of different somatic movement practitioners do in the field that I actually helped coin the name of. It's been coined by 2 people. Sylvie Fortin, a good friend, used the term ecosomatics. So somatics related to ecology.
Oh, well, how beautiful. Well, that's just one of the extra bonuses. There's also a dialogue with Martha and Simon Borg-Olivier called Conscious Movement Explorations. And there's one special bonus you get if you sign up by midnight tonight Pacific time. That is a video teaching from Martha called New Dimensions of Health and Spiritual Connectivity Through the Sun Salutation. Obviously, Sun Salutation is obviously taught in many yoga classes. And this, I want to share a little bit about this new dimension that you can activate with dynamic embodiment.
Absolutely. So I'm thinking about, I love dynamic embodiment. I feel the resourcing of the dynamic polarities and the continua along them is really important. And I thought about, well, if I were to do a book, it should be a book that people can relate to. And I thought about my own practice and ritual and movement ritual. And I thought about my own practices and movement rituals that I've either developed or been doing over my lifetime. And I said the sun salutation. Now that almost everybody's experienced a little yoga, almost everybody's done the sun salutation if it's culturally appropriate for them, or if they've had the opportunity and access. Why don't we, and we being a yoga teacher who is one of my dynamic embodiment colleagues, a practitioner of dynamic embodiment, a somatic movement therapist. So together, Shakti Smith and I created this book, Dynamic Embodiment of the Sun Salutation. And so I've made some videos to teach how the embodiment is of the chakras specifically. So chakras seem kind of elusive and very much about the energetic universal connections, and they are, but we believe, especially from the body-mind centering model, that they begin where the nerve plexes, these bunches of nerves, and the endocrine glands have junctures. That's how you get 14 glands turning into 7 chakral regions. And by being in touch with the nerve energy, I'm doing the spreading of the nerve energy, or the maybe vibratory nature of a gland, or the settling of it. Working with that can actually help clear a chakral area, or clear the whole region, the pelvis, the chest, the head. And so that's what we'll be doing. We'll be doing the sun salutation as it relates to these parts of the body, and also to how we learn to move as babies. You may have noticed that when you're doing yoga, you feel a little bit like an animal sometimes. And the titles of the different asanas are downward dog or a flower. So they're very nature oriented. So we'll spend time a little more curled and just letting our adrenals rest, so that our knees and lower back can be free and that pelvic chakra can just open. Examples like that.
Hmm. Well, clearly, so much wisdom embedded in just that one bonus, and that's your special bonus if you sign up by midnight tonight Pacific time. So, Martha, it's really clear just how much wisdom and depth of practice you have. So, we're really excited for this program, and we're excited that we've kept the investment really accessible for folks. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you save 10% when you pay in full with one payment of $349. The course is going to begin February 6th and run Tuesdays at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern. But even if you can't make those live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings and the community and the transcripts as well. And I particularly encourage you to go to the page at dynamicembodimentcourse.com and read it through it all, and particularly pay attention to the testimonials, because those really paint a vivid picture of how much people's lives change as a result of doing this work, and calmer, more energetic, more aware, excellent for personal support, more deeply connected with body and life purpose. So many tangible benefits from doing this deep embodiment work, as Martha teaches us. So again, you can find all the details at dynamicembodimentcourse.com, and you'll get that special bonus when you sign up by midnight, which is New Dimensions of Health and Spiritual Connectivity through the Sun Salutation. So Martha, what a joy it's been to be with you. Thank you for your time and wisdom. And any final thoughts you want to share with folks who are considering going deeper with you in your brand new program?
Well, I absolutely want to say that it's a pleasure to share the movement journey with anybody who's just a little curious, or just dying for, begging for more movement in their lives. Whether you're familiar with movement, or whether it's a brand new phenomena to have like a movement practice, because our bodies are designed to move, and we're dealing with change, just the simple change of aging. And change and movement are the same thing. So if you can take time to come and allow your body to resettle and find the movements that feel like openings or rests for you, you will really feel better. It's a tagline for Moving for Life, that it just makes you feel better. And this particular class just makes you feel better, and gives us the time to truly kind of let the ideas sink in and have questions answered and have a good time.
Well, thank you, Martha, for creating this program and for all your wisdom you've shared today. So again, Martha's going to be teaching dynamic embodiment movement at dynamicembodimentcourse.com starting soon. And if you sign up right away, you're going to get that special bonus. So I encourage you to go check out the page, tune in, and if you get a yes, to go ahead and move forward. There's a lot of benefits and no risks since there's money back guarantee of your satisfaction. So thank you, Martha, and thank you all for joining us. Many blessings.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.